Guys, welcome to a classic action movie review of 1996's Mission Impossible, starring Tom Cruise, John Voight, Jean Reno, and Ving Rhames. Now, this was directed by Brian De Palma, and it's an action espionage thriller that sees an American agent under false suspicion of disloyalty on the run and out to discover and expose the real traitors. Now, based on the hit television series, this marked the true turning point for its star, Tom Cruise, who not only headlined the project, but also produced it. And now, nearly 3 decades later, this remains an essential entry in the spy action genre and a strong opening chapter for what would become one of Hollywood's most enduring and greatest action franchises, raking in over $4 billion and counting. Before Cruise was running, jumping, and falling off half the world's landmarks, he was embarking on some more subtle but no less thrilling acts of daring do. So let's take a look. So back in 1996, I remember coming out of a screening of Mission Impossible without much of a clue as to what I'd just watched. I was possibly expecting a wall-to-wall action thriller, you know, the one that the trailer promised us, but what in fact I got was a couple of hours of Tom Cruise and co on a mission to intercept a stolen list of undercover agents, a knock list, before it can be sold on the black market. The operation, of course, going disastrously wrong, and all other members of Cruise's Ethan Hunt's team killed in a series of betrayals. Now, learning that the mission was a setup, an internal mole hunt by the CIA, Hunt is now the prime suspect and must clear his name / find the true villains. So yeah, there's much talk here of espionage, government lists, secret meetings and the like, and for the most part the whole thing plays out like some kind of old school Cold War John le Carre spy story. A far cry from the retina scorching bombast of the sequels. So far in fact that the dreadful sequel to this, I feel, was a response to criticism of this movie's impenetrable plot. They just got John Woo in and turned it into some kind of knockoff Asian action movie. That film has its moments, but in comparison to the rest of the series, it's quite poor. Anyway, Cruise's Ethan Hunt needs to go rogue to clear his name, and he must assemble a new team of disavowed agents, including computer hacker Luther Stickle, played by Ving Rhames, and pilot Franz Krieger, played by Jean Reno, and the wife of his old boss, Claire, played by the quite striking Emmanuel Bert. Now, together they execute a daring plan to steal the real knock list from CIA headquarters in Langley. Now this, of course, is the sequence that would become one of the most iconic heist scenes, probably in movie history, and still one of the standout sequences from the whole franchise. A sequence played out in near silence due to the vault's security measures, and one that sits in contrast to the explosiveness of the sequels. And don't get me wrong though, there are still explosive moments scattered throughout this film. The final act aboard the TGV train to Paris that kicks into gear the moment Cruise's head pops out of the top of a train into 200 miles per hour winds is quite a jaw dropper. Now, up until this point, however, much of the film's tension comes from its clever plotting, dramatic camera work, and Hitchcockian suspense. De Palma here clearly having the time of his life with a big budget. If Hitchcock had made this movie, it might not have been so different. The aforementioned CIA vault sequence where Hunt is suspended by cables in a sound-sensitive room is pure visual storytelling. No dialogue, just sweat, silence, and a stray drop threatening to blow the whole operation. And we'll get back to Brian De Palma in a few moments, but this first entry in the Mission Impossible franchise cemented Tom Cruise's transition from leading man to full-blown AAA action star. It, of course, kind of flirted with high-octane roles in things like Top Gun and Days of Thunder, but the success of this Mission Impossible movie, making a fortune from an $80 million budget, gave him his very own franchise, a chance to earn outrageous amounts of money and some true Hollywood star power. And fair play to him, to be honest, as he performs many of his own stunts here, something that would become basically the hallmark of the series, even as Cruise moved into his 60s. His portrayal of Ethan Hunt here is intense in that Tom Cruise kind of way, but in a way he's more restrained than in later entries. Here he's less the indestructible super spy / stuntman, and more a typical man on the run, constantly getting away by the skin of his teeth. Now, despite not being in it a great deal, John Voight brings some old school gravitas to Jim Phelps, a character carried over from the original television series. His character's transformation within the film becomes a bit of a point of controversy and surprise, a twist that enraged some of the fans of the TV show but added a nice bit of depth to the story. Now, Emmanuel Bert plays Claire, Phelps' enigmatic wife, who you're never sure if she's an ally or a possible betrayer. And she doesn't get a load to do, but she's absolutely stunning. And her performance does have that air of mystery that gives the movie a bit of a noir sensibility. Now, elsewhere in the cast, look out for Christian Scott Thomas, Vanessa Redgrave, and an uncredited Emilio Estevez. But perhaps the most enduring addition to the Mission Impossible mythos is Ving Rhames' Luther Stickle. I love Rhames here. He brings a kind of warmth and understated charisma to the role of the soft-spoken super hacker. His chemistry with Cruise is one of the film's highlights and has remained so for the last nearly 30 years. Luther being the only character besides Hunt to appear in every Mission Impossible film, and it all began with his quietly scene-stealing performance here. So, as I hinted at earlier, if there's one criticism often levelled at Mission Impossible, it's that its plot can be quite confusing. De Palma and screenwriters David Koepp and Robert Towne do have fun weaving a complex narrative full of double crosses, aliases and red herrings, and more than any other film in the franchise, the film asks its audience to pay attention, to connect the dots rather than being spoon-fed exposition. And for some, me included, over the years, this is part of the appeal. For others, though, used to more modern action movie sensibilities, it may just feel a tad too convoluted. Which, in fairness, is something which I'm sure drew Brian De Palma to the material. His signature style, all Dutch angles, split diopters, slow zooms and tracking shots, it does elevate the material. He draws out tension, particularly in dialogue-heavy scenes. The early restaurant debrief between Hunt and Kittredge demands that you pay attention, but then throws in an exploding chewing gum gag. Shout out here to the excellent face mask appliances that are brilliantly done by makeup effects maestro Rob Bottin, and to the score by Danny Elfman and that classic Lalo Schifrin theme tune. So 1996's Mission Impossible took the old TV show and fused it with Cold War spy movies, sprinkled on some Hollywood-level visual spectacle, and set the template for modern spy films, really. As the Pierce Brosnan-era James Bond movies began to seriously lose their way, and even the Daniel Craig entries began to suffer from woke paranoia, Cruise & Co. quietly went about fashioning the action franchise of modern times, each movie's signature stunt becoming a newsworthy event. Rewatching this is quite interesting, travelling back to 1996. Tom Cruise looks so young here. Of course, the tech looks hilariously ancient, and if you've only seen the recent entries, you may not really be ready to spend 10 minutes watching Tom Cruise send emails. It may lack the relentless action and polish of its successors, but it remains a standout entry in the series and a benchmark for 90s thrillers. Such was its success, it was only kept off the top spot of the worldwide box office by summer mega hits Twister and Independence Day. Now, the current movies do deal with non-stop globe-trotting, colossal stunt work and global nuclear threats, but at their heart, they still use tropes that first emerged right here. Now, Ethan going rogue, knowing who to trust, quickly slapping on a rubber mask to fool the villains. The spectacle got bigger for sure, but suspense, intelligence and old-fashioned spycraft never go out of style. Go check it out.
Now, believe me when I tell you, gentlemen, all three systems are state-of-the-art.
And you really think we can do this?